So I'm a curator and ontology editor at Flybase, and today, surprisingly, I will talk about adverse legal landscapes. So what the hell is that? For this talk, my tentative definition is any situation where, as an ontology editor, you are forced to make changes to your ontology in order to comply to some legal or paralegal requirements. To call things what they are, this is an euphemism for censorship. And this is what it could look like in a fictitious world. But unfortunately, since earlier this year, and as you may have heard this morning in Chris Mangal's keynote, we now have a very real example. Earlier this year, following Executive Order 14,168 for, quote, defending women against gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, end quote, the Trump administration forced the National Cancer Institute to obsolete from their NCI thesaurus all terms pertaining to the concept of gender and the idea that it is distinct from sex. So censorship of ontologies is now a thing, which raises a lot of questions, but the ones that I'd like to discuss in this 5-minute talk, using my hat as a developer of the Ontology Development Kit and of the Protégé Ontology Editor, is what could those tools possibly do to help an ontology maintainer faced with censorship requests? I'm only talking about mitigations here because this is fundamentally a political problem that cannot have technical solutions. We can only have technical mitigations. One such mitigation is one that I call the split world approach. Basically, its aim is to at least limit the impact of censorship by preventing its spread outside of the jurisdiction where it is enforceable. There would be at least two distinct ways to do that, either by preparing two different versions of an ontology, a regular non-censored edition which can be distributed worldwide, and a compliant, aka censored edition of the ontology distributed where it is required. Or alternatively, prepare and distribute a single censored version, but accompany it outside of the censoring country by patches that you can apply to the censored ontology to revert it to a non-censored state. So those are two methods that could easily be supported by the Ontology Development Kit, and this is how it could possibly work. So editors maintain their ontology normally, taking whatever editorial decisions they need and writing them in the main source file. Whenever they are required to make a change for legal reasons, they do so in a separate component so that at least legally required changes are always easily distinguishable from normal changes. And from those two source files, editor could then use the standard ODK command prepare release to automatically build and release either the normal non-censored edition of the ontology along with the censored edition, or alternatively, the censored edition along with the set of reverting patches. So none of that is done yet in the ODK, but there is no doubt that we could do it. Technically speaking, there is nothing difficult. The more interesting question, I believe, is whether we should do it. There's an argument to be made that by attempting to mitigate censorship, we could in fact end up supporting it. For what it's worth, my take on this is that no, trying to mitigate censorship is not condoning it. Censorship will happen, and in fact, as we have now seen, censorship is happening, whether we like it or not. Thank you. But at the same time, we must acknowledge that building into an ontology editing tool a feature to create a censored version of an ontology could very well encourage anticipatory compliance of self-censorship, which is the last thing that we would want. And another legitimate question is, isn't that all an overreaction? I hope it is. I don't think it is, but I hope it is. And I would very much like to be proven wrong on this. But just think about the central place of ontologies as has been highlighted, for example, by Amos Baroque yesterday morning. Most of the works that have been highlighted since the beginning of this conference, most of those work depend on data being properly annotated by ontologies. So if you are in a position to dictate what can or cannot go into an ontology, you get a hugely disproportionate amount of power of every work that depends on those ontologies. And even in the best case, and in my opinion, unlikely scenario that things don't go any further than there, and that the Trump administration stops at obsoleting what they already did obsolete, the mere fact that they did already obsolete a bunch of perfectly valid and useful terms should already be unacceptable. Thank you.